Hi, I'm Naveen Day. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. Prime Minister Mark Carney met with U.S. President Donald Trump at a high-stakes face-to-face meeting. We have the details. Plus, Alberta NDP leader Naheed Nenshi fires back at Alberta Premier Danielle Smith following her comments about a potential referendum. And a Conservative leader overcomes a historic defeat to become Germany's chancellor.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News.
Thanks for joining us. The highly anticipated meeting between Canada's new Prime Minister and the U.S. President finally happened today in Washington. Prime Minister Mark Carney was welcomed to the White House by President Donald Trump. The initial greeting was cordial enough, but once inside, reporters asked Trump if he still believed Canada should become the 51st state.
I do feel it's much better for Canada, but we're not going to be discussing that unless somebody wants to discuss it. I think that there are tremendous benefits to the Canadian citizens, tremendously lower taxes, free military, which honestly we give you essentially anyway because we're protecting Canada if you ever had a problem. But I think it would really be a wonderful marriage because it's two places that get along very well. They like each other a lot.
Well, if I may, as you know from real estate, there are some places that are never for sale.
That's true.
We're sitting in one right now, Buckingham Palace that you visited as well.
That's true.
And having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale ever. But the opportunity is in the partnership and what we can build together. And we have done that in the past. And part of that, as the President just said, is with respect to our own security. And my government is committed for a step change in our investment in Canadian security and our partnership. And I'll say this as well, that the President has revitalized international security, revitalized NATO, and us playing our full weight in NATO, and that will be part of it.
Following the closed-door portion of the meeting, Carney told reporters his talks with Trump were wide-ranging and constructive, but he will now focus on what Canada can control. He says he will have a call with the First Ministers tomorrow. As for the two leaders, Carney says he will meet again in person with Trump at the G7 Leaders Summit in Kananaskis, Alberta, in June. Yesterday, Premier Danielle Smith addressed the province by talking about setting up a new negotiating team that will work with Ottawa to hammer out what she called an Alberta Accord. She also spoke about the possibility of a citizen-initiated referendum on Alberta separation. Today, reporters had a chance to ask questions. The Premier was asked about the danger of this kind of rhetoric around separation.
The level of support for a motion like that, I've been monitoring this for decades, and it's always ebbed and flowed, been as high as 30% in the past. I think it might be a little bit higher today, but that has always been in the background in Alberta electoral politics, and it's just happened to flare up right now. But that is, citizens have a right. I believe in free speech. Citizens have a right to express their opinion on things that they're concerned about, and I think it's my job to make sure that debate is respectful, that sides know that they have a right to be able to have those conversations with their friends and family and not to be demonized for it. And so that's what I'm trying to do, is to create an environment where the conversation can be had. Well, I would hope that the near-death experience of the Liberals, where they were almost obliterated and had to change out their leader, was actually a wake-up moment for them, that they can't continue pursuing extremist policies that are supported by a fringe group of legislators like the NDP or the Bloc Québécois. And I would hope that near-death experience made them realize that what Canadians want and Albertans want is to be an economic superpower that includes energy, includes food, includes getting all of our resources to market. I mean, if anyone should look at the results of the last few months and say, gee, it's time to recalibrate, it should be the current Prime Minister. So that's why I'm very hopeful, having talked to him and said that now is the time for us to make good on the commitments that were made prior to the election, that were a joint communique released with all the premiers, and to make sure that we actually enact the things that were agreed to.
Alberta NDP leader Naheed Nenshi has fired back at Premier Smith following her comments yesterday about a potential referendum. Nenshi says Smith is picking a fight she can't win.
But what I want everyone to remember today is who stands for Alberta and who is willing to denounce separatists. Like a certain other Conservative leader who brought coffee to the convoy, Danielle Smith coddles people who want to tear our nation apart. She doesn't tell them that they're wrong. She doesn't argue with them. She doesn't say, I disagree with you. Today, finally, for the first time in months and months, she said, I'm not a separatist, but. There is no but, Premier Smith. Instead of subjecting us to these endless panels, instead of dragging out this fight, instead of making people feel angrier and more misled, instead of scaring away business investment and jobs from Alberta with your terrible policies and the uncertainty that you're creating for business, let's just do this now. Premier, you've got two choices. Actually denounce separatism, no ifs, no ands, no buts. Say you're a proud Canadian, you're a proud Albertan, and you won't stand for a referendum. Or just call a referendum. Just do it. Call it now. Let's ask Albertans to decide. And when you get the resounding, thumping defeat that you so richly deserve, let's get on with the job of building a better Alberta and a better Canada.
Nenshi says the fight right now is not with Canada, but rather with U.S. President Donald Trump. Meanwhile, the leader of the Sovereigntist Parti Québécois is cheering on a possible referendum in Alberta. Paul St-Pierre Plamondon says Alberta's premier has used the specter of a referendum to gain leverage in her demands of the federal government. The PQ lost both Quebec referendums in 1980 and 1995, but St-Pierre Plamondon promises to hold a third by 2030 if his party forms government. A big question many Albertans have to ask is if Prime Minister Mark Carney will change any of the Liberal policies to help the province's oil and gas sector and improve relations between Alberta and Ottawa. Political columnist for the Toronto Sun, Brian Lilley, gives us his thoughts.
I think given the political climate, Mark Carney and his team would be very smart to offer some kind of olive branch to Alberta. He's got to bring down the temperature on Alberta separatist sentiment, and I know the vast majority of Albertans are not there yet, but you don't want to let that fester to where it goes from 20, 25, 30% to 40, 45, 50%. You don't want it to get there. And it's incumbent upon any prime minister to focus on national unity.
Catch my full interview with Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley coming up later in the program. The Conservative caucus has chosen Saskatchewan MP-elect Andrew Scheer as the interim opposition leader in the House of Commons to lead the party in Parliament during the spring sitting. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre lost his re-election bid to represent the riding of Carleton and cannot serve as the opposition leader in Parliament without a seat. He will attempt to regain a seat in the House in a yet-to-be-called by-election in the Alberta riding of Battle River-Crowfoot. A failed Liberal candidate in Windsor who lost to his Conservative rival Cathy Borrelli by just 77 votes in last week's federal election says he is filing for a judicial recount. Eric Kazmierczyk, a Liberal incumbent who ran in the Windsor-Tecumseh Lakeshore riding, says in a social media post today that the razor-thin margin of victory for the Conservative candidate is just 7 votes short of Elections Canada's threshold for triggering an automatic recount. Kazmierczyk says in the post that counting errors can happen and that Elections Canada found 4 errors in reports from local polling stations on election night. He says that reduced the margin of the Conservative victory from 233 to 77 votes. Elections Canada shows that Borrelli took the riding with 32,062 votes, or 45.8% of the votes. Kazmierczyk, who won the seat in 2019 and 2021, this time netted 31,985 votes, or 45.7% of the vote. AltaLink wants to remind residents throughout southern Alberta that they will be performing aerial patrols of Albertan transmission facilities next week from May 12th to the 15th. A helicopter will be visually monitoring over the 13,400 kilometers of electric transmission lines to gather data and detect any disruptions and deficiencies in the grid. AltaLink says this annual inspection should cause little disruption to residents, animals, or communities in the vicinity and is necessary in maintaining a stable and reliable electricity grid.
We are very mindful and work very hard to minimize the impact of any noise disturbance from the helicopter for people and animals in the area. Typically, what we look for in these patrols is anything that's impacted the lines, for example, from winter weather damage. So we do these patrols in the spring, and then we're able to determine if there's any damage from the different weather seasons. There's also growing vegetation that we look for around the lines and within our rights of way. Vegetation that gets too close to our lines does have the impact to either fall into a line or make contact with a line that can create reliability concerns, power outages, potentially even wildfire risk. So that's why we look for anything that's in the path of the right of way or that could have been damaged.
Patrolling will occur across communities along the Trans-Canada Highway, including from Calgary to Medicine Hat, as well as many other communities in the southern region, including here in Lethbridge. Early Sunday morning, Taber Police Service responded to multiple 911 calls of a male destroying property at a local grocery store. An investigation revealed that a male had destroyed multiple metal shelving units and potted flowers. The male also attempted to breach the store by throwing a metal shelving unit at the pane glass windows. The intoxicated man was arrested on the scene. 25-year-old Beau Spencer Clarkson of Taber was charged with mischief under $5,000 and failure to comply with an undertaking. He was released following a judicial interim release hearing and was scheduled to appear in the Taber Court of Justice today. After a friendly competition between the towns of Coaldale and Taber, Coaldale has come away the winner of the Tim Hortons Smile Cookie Challenge, raising over $13,000. The competition was held from April 28th to May 4th, with 100% of the proceeds from cookie sales going to local charities and community groups. Taber raised over $11,000. The result of this fundraising for both communities is a total grant of around $24,700, which will be designated to Family and Community Support Services, or FCSS. The Mayor of Coaldale, Jack Van Ryan, talks more on this successful campaign.
The total amount that was extremely successful. As far as other campaigns, I'm not sure how much they've raised in the past, but for this campaign for Family Community Support Services, this was one of their largest fundraiser events through the Smile Cookie campaign. We had shifts from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. every day. We were able to fill all those shifts with local residents wanted to volunteer. We have community organization. As mayor of the town of Coaldale, I am extremely proud of our residents, not only in the town of Coaldale, but also in Lethbridge County, that came out to support this initiative for Family Community Support Services.
FCSS is really excited to be selected for the 2025 Smile Cookie campaign in Coaldale and in Taber. FCSS is a prevention-based local organization providing supports for families and individuals, helping them to thrive and succeed, building healthy families and being well within communities and helping communities thrive.
The Tim Hortons Smile Cookie campaign supports over 600 charities and community groups across Canada and in the United States. A new night market is coming to Lethbridge. The Agri-Food Hub and Trade Centre will hold this event every Saturday from June 28th to August 30th. The free outdoor-indoor market will feature local vendors, food trucks, drinks, a patio, and live music that attendees can enjoy while shopping and supporting local vendors. Paul Kingsmith, Director of Event Development for Lethbridge and District Exhibition, explains what else this summer project offers.
While also giving the opportunity for market vendors to reach those local audiences. So a little economic boost for those businesses, as well as adding to the culture and the excitement of the summer here in the Henderson Lake District from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. So starting in that late afternoon, interest the public that help drive the economy here in southern Alberta. And so an event like this does that. It's a chance to bring everybody together. And so we want to make it more than just a marketplace. There'll be vendors, and we're working with the Domesticated Divas group to really get a unique set of vendors in here that provide a cool atmosphere.
King Smith says vendors and food trucks interested in applying to be a part of the market can get more information on the Lethbridge and District Exhibition websites. The YMCA of Lethbridge say they are very appreciative after receiving support funds for 2 distinct summer youth programs. Green Slate Estate is contributing funds to enable youth in the city to participate in the Y's NHL street hockey program, while the Charles McIntyre Memorial Fund will increase access to various summer camps put on by the YMCA. The Y says the funds towards the street hockey program alone should be able to help accommodate dozens more youth in their program.
Summer programs are super important for the community. When youth aren't in school, they don't have necessarily much to do during the day, and we want to be able to provide them opportunities to engage in play and sport with each other, and to be able to provide a space where everyone can belong and thrive regardless of their economic situation. The YMCA is super appreciative of Graham Greenslade as well as the family of Charles McIntyre. Without their contributions, we wouldn't be able to provide nearly as much support to the families in our community.
In international news, this week 133 Catholic cardinal electors will choose a new pope in a secretive, centuries-old ritual called a conclave. On Wednesday, the electors among the church's most senior officials will be locked inside the Vatican's Sistine Chapel to hold as many rounds of voting as proved necessary to select the next pontiff. Tricia Thomas with the Associated Press has more.
The Vatican is busy with last-minute arrangements to get ready for the conclave to elect the next pope, which starts tomorrow, Wednesday afternoon. This morning, the cardinals met for the last time for one of their congregations. It was the 12th of those such meetings to discuss the problems facing the 1.4 billion strong Catholic Church. Over the course of these meetings, there have been over 200 speeches by cardinals, and it's been a good chance for them to get to know each other as they search for the ideal candidate for the next pope. At the end of the meeting today, a Vatican employee came and destroyed the fisherman's ring. The fisherman's ring is something that has been a tradition going back centuries for popes. The popes wear the fisherman's ring, and once, centuries ago, they used it to seal papal documents by sticking it in red wax and then putting it at the end of a document. Today, this afternoon, the cardinals will be able to go into the Santa Marta residence inside the Vatican walls for the first time. They will be staying there throughout the conclave, and the Vatican has set up a jamming system, so they will not have access to internet or cell phones, so that the conclave will be conducted in complete secrecy. The only way we will know of the election of a pope is when we see white smoke coming out of the chimney on top of the Sistine Chapel behind me.
Germany has a new chancellor. Hours after suffering defeat on the first ballot, leader of the Christian Democratic Union, Friedrich Merz, was elected on the second ballot, receiving 325 of the 316 votes required for a majority.
Der Abgeordnete Friedrich Merz hat die erforderliche Mehrheit von mindestens 316 Stimmen erreicht. Ist gemäß Artikel 63 Absatz 2 des Grundgesetzes zum Bundeskanzler der Bundesrepublik Deutschland gewählt worden.
No other post-war candidate for German chancellor has failed to win on the first ballot. The stunning but short-lived defeat sent shockwaves throughout Europe and dragged down the stock market. U.S. President Donald Trump's administration says it's going to pay immigrants in the U.S. illegally who've returned to their home country voluntarily $1,000. The Associated Press has more.
President Donald Trump's administration says it's going to pay immigrants in the United States illegally who've returned to their home country voluntarily $1,000 as it pushes forward with its mass deportation agenda. The Department of Homeland Security said Monday that it's also paying for travel assistance and that people who use their CBP Home app to tell the government they plan to return home will be, quote, deprioritized for detention and removal by immigration enforcement. Trump has made immigration enforcement a centerpiece of his campaign.
Our border is open and gushing. It's a big gushing wound.
But that is a costly, resource-intensive endeavor. The Republican administration is pushing Congress for a massive increase in resources, but also pushing people in the country illegally to, quote, self-deport.
You know, there's lots of free vitamin D available all week. All you have to do is go outside and enjoy all that sunshine and summery temperatures. A full look at our weather is coming up next.
Our 7-day forecast has us with a high of 19 with sunny skies for today. Wednesday will have a high of 26 with sunny skies, and the rest of the week is looking to be sunny as well, with Thursday having a high of 21, Friday a 23, and Saturday a high of 28. Sunday will also share a high of 28 but with partly cloudy skies, and finishing off the 7-day forecast with Monday, we have a high of 21 with a chance of showers. Today's almanac has with an average high of 17 for today, with an average low of 3. The record high on this day was set back in 1953 with 29, and the record low was set back in 1919 with -7. The sun rose at 6 a.m. today and set at 8:56 p.m. Our national forecast has the west coast with some showers, Vancouver getting a high of 17, and Victoria getting a high of 18, both cities having a chance of showers. Edmonton is going to have a high of 27 with sunny skies, and Calgary will have a high of 25 with sunny skies. The rest of the prairies have Saskatoon with a high of 25 and sunny skies, Regina has a high of 23 with sunny skies, and Winnipeg has a high of 20 with partly cloudy skies. Central Canada is going to get some showers, with Toronto and Montreal having highs of 20, and Ottawa having a high of 14. Fredericton has a high of 15 with a chance of showers, Halifax has a high of 14 with a chance of showers, and Charlottetown has a high of 15 also with a chance of showers. Finishing off our national forecast with St. John's, we have a high of 15 and sunny skies.
The risk of another work stoppage at Canada Post looms in just over 2 weeks. Existing deals between the Crown Corporation and the union representing 55,000 Canada Post workers expire on May the 22nd. A strike or lockout would mark the second time in under 6 months that the Postal Service grinds to a halt. Experts say Canada Post's dire financial situation means it may struggle to meet workers halfway on their contract demands.
The two sides have really struggled to come together. They remain at a bit of an impasse. There are some really key sticking points, including around wages, as one might expect in labor negotiations. Initially, the union asked for a 24% wage hike over 4 years, and that's being asked of a Crown Corporation that had an $845 million operating loss in 2023. So it's tough to reconcile those two things. If you add that disruption onto the economic turmoil and anxiety, uncertainty that we're already seeing as a result of the trade war between the U.S. and China, but also, the tariffs, which seem to change every other week between Canada and the U.S. It's a lot of shipping disruption, a lot of trade disruption, and another point of economic unease.
Stats Canada is reporting a $506 million merchandise trade deficit for March. That compares to a deficit of $1.4 billion in February. The agency found exports to the United States fell with the implementation of new tariffs, but shipments to other countries climbed. Canada's merchandise trade surplus with the U.S. was $8.4 billion in March, down from over $2 billion from February. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 21 points on the day to finish at 24,974. The Dow was down 389 points to 40,829. The S&P 500 was down 43 to 5606, and the Nasdaq was down 154 points to finish at 17,689. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $1.83 to 58.96 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 6 cents to 3.48 US. Gold was up 97.04 to 34.3157 US an ounce, and silver was up 70 cents to 33.21 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.84 per bushel, barley is at $6.97, canola is at $15.74, and corn is at $8.02 per bushel. Live cattle June contract was up 3 cents to $2.1368. Feeder cattle were down 38 cents to $2.9570. Lean hogs were down 70 cents to $91.55, And the Canadian dollar was even over the past 24 hours and currently sits at 72.60 US. Recapping one of our top stories, Prime Minister Mark Carney met with U.S. President Donald Trump in a highly anticipated face-off at the White House. Carney told reporters his talks with Trump were wide-ranging and constructive, but he will now focus on what Canada can control. He says he will have a call with the First Ministers tomorrow. It was their first in-person meeting since Canada's election amid a tense trade war between the two countries. As Canada's new Prime Minister Mark Carney takes the wheel, Canadians are watching how he handles Trump and address concerns raised by Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith. Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley gives us his take on national issues coming up next. And when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. You can also visit our website or YouTube channel anytime to check out more of our stories and interviews. Prime Minister Mark Carney was in Washington Tuesday for his first face-to-face meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump. To talk about this in more detail is political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley. Brian, this was a high-stakes meeting for the Prime Minister as Canada's relationship with the U.S. is at its lowest point in decades. So walk us through this. How did the public part of the meeting go?
About as well as you could hope. Nothing went off the rails. There was no Zelensky moment with Carney being kicked out. They held a news conference and then they went to lunch. If you recall, Zelensky didn't make it to lunch, and the lunch they had set out for the Ukrainian delegation and the Americans was fed to young White House staffers. So they made it to lunch. That's a good thing. Started off with Donald Trump being very complimentary to Mark Carney, talking about what a great election he had. This guy came up through the ranks. Well, he didn't really. So Trump was saying a lot of things that weren't quite accurate, but praising Carney while doing it, saying he watched the debate and thought he did a really good debate performance. And then, Carney returned the favor, talked about how Trump was a transformational president, that he wanted to work with him. And my government will have a bigger focus on the economy and on our defense and securing the Arctic, and fentanyl, all things that are music to Trump's ears. So it started off with them praising each other, complimenting each other. And then, of course, you get into the weeds and things like 51st State and trade irritants. And they were able to keep it on track, though.
Now, you mentioned 51st State because Trump continues to taunt Canada with his 51st State remarks. So how did Carney handle that?
So it came up from a reporter asking the question. Trump did not raise it directly, but when asked about it, it's interesting. It was a very different take than we've seen from him before. He said, well, I still think it would be good, but it takes two to tango. And if both sides want to do it, we'll talk about it and we'll go forward. But that's not what we're here about. But I still think it'd be really good for Canada. I still think, this would be great for the Canadian people. Mark Carney just calmly said, Mr. President, there are some places that are never for sale, like the building we're in right now, the White House or Buckingham Palace. And he said, I can tell you, having spent the last couple months talking to the owners of Canada during the election campaign, Canada's not for sale. And, we're not interested in the 51st State. It was handled fairly well. Like, I think Mark Carney did the best job he could in the situation. Throughout the back and forth with the media, kind of a freewheeling scrum as they're sitting there in the Oval Office. The issue did come back a couple of times, and Trump said, never say never, and maybe we can find a way. But that was a point where it really could have gone off the rails, and it didn't. Towards the end on trade, that's where things got a little bit dicey.
Okay, yeah. So then let's talk about that, because tariffs and trade were major topics that needed to be discussed. However, here in Alberta, the biggest impact on our economy isn't tariff related, it's the price of oil. So has Carney given any indication of making moves that could see Alberta get a better price on oil in the future?
Donald Trump did talk about oil and the energy that both countries have and how, tremendous that is. We didn't hear from Carney in the meeting about that. I have not seen him say anything that would lead me to believe that he is going to take his focus off clean energy. Throughout the election campaign, we heard him talk about making Canada an energy superpower in conventional and clean energy. He really didn't like using the words oil, gas, or pipeline. But I think given the political climate, Mark Carney and his team would be very smart to offer some kind of olive branch to Alberta. He's got to bring down the temperature on Alberta separatist sentiment, and I know the vast majority of Albertans are not there yet. But you don't want to let that fester to where it goes from 20, 25, 30% to 40, 45, 50%. You don't want it to get there. And it's incumbent upon any prime minister to focus on national unity. And right now, issues of national unity need to be dealt with in the prairies, in Alberta and next door in Saskatchewan. By the way, everyone's talking about you guys. The latest polling I saw showed more people in Saskatchewan ready to bolt than in Alberta. Not by much, but a little bit. So the prime minister needs to be able to go in and offer something, whether that is a pipeline or if he's not going to get rid of C-69, because I've talked to some Liberals that say, no, we still need that there so that we can deal with First Nations issues and get the projects through the courts. Okay, well, if that's what it is, then map out your changes to C-69 and map out which pipelines you will approve and how you will approve them. Start talking about the demands that Premier Smith made. I was looking at the spot price of oil, and Western Canadian Select down at $44 a barrel. West Texas Intermediate in the 50s. A little while ago, those were trading at $80 and $70 respectively. That was within the last year. That was within 8-9 months. So that's a tremendous hit to the Alberta economy, which means it's a tremendous hit to the Canadian economy. Making those overtures and offering the olive branch, that would help the Canadian economy.
Right. Now, the latest thing that Trump has been lamenting about is movies being made in places other than Hollywood. Now, he's talking about a tariff on movie production. How exactly would that work? And would it just cost Canadians more to go catch a flick?
I'm not sure, and he is talking about it a lot, but he hasn't given any details. And Howard Lutnick, his Commerce Secretary, has talked about it. Why are films produced elsewhere? He said with his gravelly voice on Larry Kudlow's show. Okay, let's, we've got little movie hubs all across Canada. We've got them across the United States. Part of the reason for that is all the movies used to be shot in New York and Hollywood and became very expensive. It was tough to find the crews to be able to staff the movies. They added regulations and red tape and permits and just made it impossible. And so the movie industry is now spread out all over. So would they say if you shot a movie in Alberta, let's say, or like the Last of Us TV show was shot there, or the movie Remnant, if that's shot there, do they then say, well, if you want to show it in America, you're going to pay a tariff on all the expenses of the Canadian crew? Because I doubt they would consider the salary of the American star living in Beverly Hills paying U.S. taxes to be something that you're going to tariff them on. But they might tariff the cost of everything that was spent in Canada on the crews, on the catering, things like that. Basically, just try and make it more expensive so that you force production back to the United States. But this is a very strange one, but one that seems to have caught the president's attention. I think he even mentioned it in the meeting with Carney. We'll see if, find out later if he discussed it over lunch with him.
All right, now back to Canada. Most Canadian auto parts are still being exempted from American tariffs, but not vehicles. So how big has the layoff impact been so far?
It's between 1,500 and 2,000 people laid off. That's at the Stellantis plant, the old Chrysler plant. They make the Chrysler Pacifica, the minivan. They make the Dodge Charger there. And the General Motors plant in Oshawa, a few hours drive away, where they make things like the Chevy Silverado. So, in terms of GM, that is almost exclusively related to the tariff issue. In Windsor, at the Stellantis plant, it's a combination of the tariffs, but also they're retooling their line for the upcoming production of the new models. But the tariffs are making it that much more things are not stable. It's unstable in terms of how things will go forward. So it is really hurting. And then, of course, those have knock-on effects on the parts makers. So right now, the Stellantis plant, it's a 1 to 2 week layoff there. They've lost an entire shift at the General Motors plant. So that's 750 workers there, 750 in Windsor. You don't want it to go down to from 3 to 2 to 1 shift at a plant like that, because if you start going in that direction, the whole plant just closes.
Now, we should also shed some light on the tariffs on pork and canola imposed by China, as they don't get the same kind of attention on auto tariffs. So any chance those could be lifted soon?
So those are with China, and it's in retaliation for our tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. And I understand Premier Smith's frustration on that front, because we imposed tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles to protect the electric vehicle market, that's just starting to grow in Ontario. And she says, well, it's non-existent, and we've got real jobs that are at stake. And so China retaliates with tariffs on canola and pork. I don't know what the answer is. I do know that China's, the reason that the tariffs were put on, it started with the Biden administration, and we had to follow suit not to be offside of them. And Trump has kept them in place. And if we go offside of Trump on that, we're going to be, facing tariffs on all kinds of goods. And so, yeah, it's painful. And hopefully for the canola farmers, they can find different markets. But I'm not sure that we're going to see a solution on that anytime soon. China's entire economic strategy, whether it's EVs or something else, is to go in, flood the market with cheap product, get you addicted to it, and then make sure that they're the dominant one. And if we allow that to happen, there will be zero auto industry in North America. And that's why the Biden administration, followed by Trump, said, we're doing this and you have to follow. If we lift those EV tariffs to get the canola tariffs off, we're in for a whole heap of trouble from the Americans on a number of other fronts.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre met with his caucus today, and from what I understand, there's no real attempt to push him out, but the party does need to find an interim leader in the House of Commons for the spring sitting, because Poilievre is obviously no longer an MP. How safe is Poilievre in his position as Conservative leader?
It's only going to be about 3 weeks of sitting, and, based on timing, we should see Pierre Poilievre back in the House of Commons in time for the September sitting, and he will be representing an Alberta riding, we assume by then, Battleford Crowfoot, I believe it is. Sorry, probably Battle Creek Crowfoot. I've got the name wrong there. Yeah. And he was out visiting there. He was in Consort, Alberta the other day, meeting with Damien Crook and his team, went to Crook's family farm, met the campaign staff. He's looking forward to that. It appears that he's safe for now, but you have to remember that when the Conservatives lost the 2019 election, that was October 2019, wasn't until December that Andrew Scheer was gone. Things started dropping in November and into early December, and then Scheer took the decision to step down. I remember going to chat with him in his office, and I could tell at that point that he was going to leave. Aaron O'Toole, he lost the election in September 2021. He wasn't taken out until February 2022. So we could see something happen, but we're just over a week since the election. I haven't been receiving phone calls from high-ranking members of the party saying Pierre's got to go. You haven't seen people organizing yet. If we see those things happen in the next few weeks, he could be in trouble. At this point, he seems to have the support of the caucus and the grassroots, and that's what any leader needs.
We're almost out of time, but I want to squeeze in one more question, because you've written about infighting in the Conservative camp, and it's just over a week since the election, and I'm curious if there's any signs it will get better.
Well, Jamil Jivani, Conservative MP, was just out doing another interview talking about Doug Ford and how Doug Ford is the problem. Ford and Jivani have a personal animosity, and that's what it is with so much of these. It's personal relationships that have gone sour. And so my advice in my columns and, in phone calls with people is, you got to put that aside. If you want to keep on fighting, you're not going to win. You've got to put that aside. I think once the dust settles with Pierre and his by-election, I think or maybe even before then, I think you're going to see him try and, if he's smart, meet with people like Doug Ford, meet with people like Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston, with Peter MacKay. Try and build bridges with the different parts of your coalition that you need, because they froze a lot of them out at the federal level over the past 2 years because they were riding so high in the polls. And then when things tightened up and they needed them, those folks weren't there. You want them on your side. You want everybody working to get you elected. Let's hope that that's how they operate going forward.
Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Every so often we hear of cities that experience emergency situations of one kind or another, be it hurricanes, flooding, earthquakes, fires, etc. So obviously municipalities need to be prepared to respond to these ahead of time. So how is Lethbridge prepared for an emergency? Well, today's guest is going to share how you can be part of the answer. Jamie Anderson is the Emergency Planning Administrator with the City of Lethbridge. Welcome, Jamie. Great to have you with me today.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to talk emergency social services.
Okay, well, it's good that you're excited to talk about emergencies. It means that you are prepared and you're also passionate about it. So, Jamie, our city has something called the Emergency Social Services Team, or ESS for short, right? So, can you maybe give us a brief overview of what this team is about?
Yeah, you betcha. So the Emergency Social Services team fits within the broader emergency management portfolio. So responding to disasters, like you mentioned earlier, but the Emergency Social Services team specifically focuses on the people. So evacuees, how are we providing the basic essentials that people would need in a time of disaster to get back and reestablish themselves as quickly as possible to their day-to-day lives.
Okay, so you are looking for local volunteers who have already a certain amount of skills, I guess, that they can offer to the city in an emergency situation. But I guess volunteers also need to go through a certain amount of training. So what kind of training needs to be completed by these volunteers?
Yeah, you betcha. So for prerequisites, we kind of like to say, if you have that willingness to learn and the passion to help other people, that's the prerequisite. We have lots of volunteers who do come with predetermined skill sets and careers that are very focused, but we provide all of the training that would be needed in order to respond in an emergency social services capacity. So we do monthly micro learns, so 1 hour once a month. And we also do tabletop exercises and integration into the broader planning. So we get to do exercises with the emergency management team when they do their full scale exercises. But we do run the program based on incident command system, which is the command system that is used for emergencies in the province of Alberta. So training in ICS, or incident command system, is a requirement, and we provide that as well.
Okay. What kind of time commitment are we looking at for volunteers?
Yeah, so typically speaking, we look at about 12 hours annually. So that accommodates the 1 hour micro learns once a month. There are other times when additional time might be committed, and that could be in a response event. So if we do have something happening in the city, that would mean more time. And we have the ICS training to get people up and running. And that is an on your own time training, or we offer it in person. And that is about a 2 day commitment. So to get up and running, it's about 2 days to get all the knowledge, but then a monthly micro learn, so 1 hour once.
Oh, I bet that's an intense couple of days there. Pack it all in. I understand, Jamie, that you need people who can maybe assist individuals and families who have been displaced from their homes to find shelter and accommodation. What kind of occupations or experience would someone need to fill this role?
Absolutely. So that is kind of our primary focus. Again, if someone has been displaced from their homes, how are we making sure that they have what they need in that basic requirement? So that could be shelter, it could be food, it could be clothing if that's required, or it could be specialized services. We build the program, and then we train people to operate within that program. So there really isn't any specialized skill set that you need when you come to the table. It's just that willingness to help and that willingness to learn. Um, More and more, we see that emergency social services is a community response. And so, in a time of event in other communities, we have this outpouring of community members that want to support their neighbors. And we wanted to take a proactive approach to that and say, we would like to have people trained so that they're feeling comfortable when they come to the table if they do want to help their neighbors in that time of event.
Yeah. And I guess in emergencies, people need food, clothing. So would you be looking for people with professional experience, maybe in food prep necessarily?
No, not necessarily. So the way that we have structured the program is based on agreements and MOUs that we have with uh, industry specialists throughout the city. So really, we're the facilitators. We're getting the information from evacuees to say what is the service that you need, or what are the requirements that you need in order to reestablish yourself to that baseline or to get you through this event. And so we connect people to those resources, and we provide registration for them so that they are able to access certain resources, but we don't need to be the specialists in those resources.
Okay, interesting. I guess with that said, usually, if disasters do take place, there can be a very real impact or a toll on people's emotional health. So would it maybe make sense to have an emotional and psychological support available to people who might be experiencing trauma or distress? So would you necessarily be looking for trained counselors or mental health professionals?
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest things that we see is, this is obviously going to be the worst day of someone's life when they're coming to meet us. So we really look at taking an empathetic approach and making sure that we're welcoming. But again, we don't need to be the experts, but we need to know the experts to get people connected with them. So we have a strong relationship with a number of different agencies throughout the community who do specialize in trauma supports and specialize in that emotional and psychological wellness capacity in different specialized areas. So, be it seniors or children or anywhere in between, we really want to connect people with the subject matter experts while providing that warm, welcoming approach that we can offer.
That's awesome. Are there other cities using a similar approach, like having a team of trained volunteers on standby?
Yeah, absolutely. So, providing an emergency social services response is part of the overall emergency management portfolio. So, it is a requirement for municipalities. And a lot of municipalities tackle this in house. So, we do have staff members who are ESS volunteers as well, in addition to their day to day jobs. But what we see, again, as I mentioned earlier, this outpouring of community response. When something happens, be it in our community or if we have another community evacuating um, to our area, and we saw that with Jasper when they were evacuated
Okay,
last summer, and
right,
Fort McMurray when they evacuated a few years
right.
ago.
I remember
Um,
High River as well.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, a lot of the refugees, I guess, if you want to call them, that had to come and live at the U of L. Yeah, so that's kind of what we're talking about here, right?
yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about. And when we see that, um, you know, people people have a desire to help out. They really want to make sure that when someone is coming to our community or when people are in a time of need, that there's this real outpouring of love and support. And that's usually where volunteers come from. So what we are trying to do is we're trying to proactively train volunteers so that in that moment people are feeling more comfortable and they're feeling more successful in the systems and the processes that we have in place to support evacuees, and that will allow us um, to focus on kind of the wellness piece of it. And we're not trying to learn the documentation piece or the paperwork piece while we're helping people who are struggling.
Okay, evacuees. That was the word I was looking for. I called them refugees. The evacuees. Okay, so I know for sure Lethbridge has helped evacuees from, like, I remember Medicine Hat, was it the summer of 2013, I believe, that big flood. So Medicine Hat was affected, High River, Calgary. Has Lethbridge ever undergone a situation like this where there was maybe flooding or fires or anything in the past?
So the thing is there could be catalyst for a response. regardless of it making that kind of large scale media impact, right? So it could be an apartment building that maybe is evacuated. It could be a senior center that's evacuated. We really, the way that we are activated is through our director of emergency management. So if we hit a capacity where people can't meet the needs themselves, or where our city departments operationally cannot support the need, then we activate emergency social services and we can support from there.
I know, exactly. What about first aid? I would imagine that would that be part of that 2-day training?
So first aid is one of those things that we wouldn't do ourselves, but would facilitate that response. So if someone is in medical need, we defer to the experts and we would be calling 911, or we would be supporting that way. Um, but understanding what needs might be there, or understanding where something might escalate, that's what we train in, and that's what we are aware of as volunteers.
Have you personally ever had to undergo a municipal emergency?
I
Or work
have.
with one?
I have been in several municipalities who have had different levels of activation. I have seen like trying to think of examples. So I've seen smaller scale activation where we have had seniors facilities who have had to evacuate and needed a place to go. Um, in that scenario, if it's a couple of hours, maybe we would open up a reception center where people can just go and get warm, or cool off in the summertime, and wait until the circumstances abate, I guess. There are also proactive measures, right? Again, when we have evacuees from other communities that are coming um, into our area, we could see an activation for that as well. So it doesn't even need to be a disaster or an emergency situation impacting our city specifically, but we could activate to support our neighbors as well.
Right. I would imagine that an area also where some help might be needed might look little bit more administrative, but very necessary, possibly helping reuniting family members and establishing communication between them. I can see that being kind of a scary situation, or maybe setting up a system where people can register for assistance and get questions answered about what kind of helps are available for them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that keys in on really what we focus on. So we do have a reunification program, and we have a plan in place that we would teach volunteers how to take the information and share the information in a way that is compliant with different legislation pieces on sharing people's personal information. But we also, again, that's why it's so critical that we focus on the registration piece. Is how are we knowing who is within our system, who needs help, and how are we reuniting them with the people that they love, or the people that might be looking for them? Because you're right, it can be very chaotic when people are evacuating um, situations like fires or floods, and they're getting out in a hurry. Maybe cell phone batteries have gone dead. How many of us remember all those key phone numbers off the top of our heads anymore? So being able to provide that reunification is really important.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the big emergency that comes to my mind is the Los Angeles fires. Nowhere close to us right now, but it really makes you think about everything that can go wrong. I mean, pets getting lost. You heard stories about that. There are pets getting lost in the shuffle. So maybe, do we have people that you're looking for that maybe have skills in those areas that want to volunteer to provide animal care?
Yep, yep. Companion animal programming is another area that we do have a specialized program for, and that goes anywhere from how are we keeping people with their companion animals if they're sheltered with us? How are we supporting by keeping animals if they can't be sheltered together? Or how are we retrieving animals if someone is maybe working out of town for the day and they can't get back to their homes? How are we making sure that those animals are accounted for as well? So a lot of, you asked about administrative responsibilities earlier. A lot of what we do is that administrative component, taking the information and tracking it in a way that we can use it and make it functional, and then making sure that we are able to tell the story of the event after the fact. So the administrative piece is kind of the biggest piece that we work on. And again, we do all of the training for that. We'll teach people how to use the forms and how the programs work. They just need to They just need to have that willingness to want to help out.
Great information here for us, Jamie. Thanks so much for being with us. Appreciate all the information and something I certainly didn't know that we had in place here in Lethbridge, but appreciate having you on today.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Jamie Anderson is the Emergency Planning Administrator with the City of Lethbridge. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.